following is a presentation of Learfield IMG College. From the Georgia Southern Sports Network, powered by Learfield IMG College.
Wings up, Eagle Nation! Touchdown, Georgia Southern!
This is Inside Eagle Nation, your all-access look into Eagle athletics.
Taking a look through all the other action in Georgia Southern athletics this past week. A lot of road action. A lot of teams hitting the old I-16 out of town.
Getting on the steel horse and taking us to parts north, south, west, wherever. Can't really go too much farther east.
Now let's return to the Learfield IMG College studios. Here are your hosts, Colin Lacy and Danny Reed.
That's a fact, Jack.
Welcome into another edition of Inside Eagle Nation. Man, oh man, if people could see what happens before the camera comes on.
The arm has a mind of its own sometimes.
Colin Lacy alongside the voice of the Eagles, Danny Reed, as we get it going. Episode number 156, and you brought this up a couple of weeks ago. 156 is 3 years worth of once-a-week podcast. So it's been a little bit over 3 years. It hasn't been 3 years consecutively.
Correct.
Had to take the 3 months off when the furlough happened, miss one other week when, well, yeah. And then, but 3 years, we have done 3 years worth of podcasts.
And for the most part, we've been able to keep it fresh.
Yeah, I would hope so.
Rogers had more than enough stories. We've gotten Miss Helen for some basketball stories. We're going to have to go back out and visit her.
I saw on Facebook, it popped up on my timeline that it was 3 or 4 years ago, a couple of days ago, that we went out and talked to Miss Helen. Spent well over an hour over there.
Oh, yeah.
When she started bringing out the scrapbooks, I was like, well, this isn't going to be a short visit, and I was pretty okay with it.
Well, she has a lot of things over there called media guides, and there aren't a whole lot of media guides anymore because they're all digital. But to have something, I'm an old school guy. I love to have something in my hands just because it's easier access. Digital's a lot more efficient. But there's something to be said for having that physical media guide because many moons ago, if you were covering a team or broadcasting for a team, the media guide was it.
Yeah, that was your go-to.
That's all you had.
But we've got a lot to get to this week. Men's basketball and women's basketball both starting off the season about as good as you can get. 2-0 on the season for both squads. Volleyball heading to Foley, Alabama for the Sunbelt Conference Tournament later on this week. So a lot to get to on this week's edition of Inside Eagle Nation. We'll dive right into it. Last week, women's golf finished 2nd out of 11 for the Mercer Invitational last Monday and Tuesday. All 6 Eagles finished in the top 30 individually in the third straight second-place finish for Georgia Southern women's golf under Mimi Burke. And for somebody under their first year of direction for that women's golf program, still relatively a young program in the grand scheme of things, 3 straight second-place finishes for women's golf to finish up the fall portion of the schedule. That's really got to put you in a right mindset going into the spring.
I think we've covered a few times that this is still a relatively new program in the grand scheme. It took a little while to get going, and thankfully Ella Ofstedal was on roster for a couple of years. One of the best in the conference, was the medalist for a couple of years. But you're seeing with a complete team what women's golf is capable of here. We know what Carter Collins has done on the men's side. He has his own segment on this practically.
We'll get there.
But for Mimi to have all of this success this early, and for Saranchana Rantanathan to be good in the fall like she has, you would just hope that that's going to lead to even better things in the spring.
So that finished up the fall portion of the schedule for them. They will look ahead to middle of February is when they will get it going in the spring. Georgia Southern volleyball finished up the regular season at home, got the victory 3-1 over the Trojans of Troy.
Was that Hawaiian shirt night?
I believe so.
Okay. Because senior night would have been against South.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe it was Hawaiian shirt night. And I would have loved to seen what Chad Willis's shirt or E's shirt would be.
Yeah, because since he already pulled off the Macho Man Randy Savage earlier this year.
Yeah, I mean, there's really only one way to go from there. Ended up falling 3-0 against South Alabama, but because of the 3-1 victory over Troy on Friday, they locked in the 3rd seed in the Sunbelt Conference Tournament. Really good finish for this team, and we talked about it. 6 of the last 8 being at home helps. But now you head into Foley, Alabama. You take on ULM coming up on Thursday, 1 p.m., the first serve from Foley. But a really good way to finish what was a really good season for this team.
And I look at that bracket. ULM is one that the Eagles should probably, I'm not sure if they even favor in volleyball. I don't know if you'd be able to put a line on that. I'm not even sure if that's something that exists, but they should be in contention to go on to the second round where they would get a chance to get some revenge against UT Arlington, who you remember came to Hanner and defeated the Eagles earlier this year. And I thought that weekend was going to go a little bit different, where they didn't win a set in those two matches against Texas State and UTA. Yep. And that was part of that 6-8. And I wonder if that was a point where, all right, these are the final lumps we're going to take. This is what we really need to learn from South Alabama coming in and ending the season the way they did. Okay, but to get one against Troy, getting revenge on them after a 5-set loss at Trojan Arena earlier this year, you don't want to look ahead too much. But in the case of tournament play, you kind of have to, because you have to have at least one eye on that next potential opponent, because it's going to come the very next day.
Yeah, and the way that the Sunbelt Conference tournament is kind of set up, very similar to what you saw with basketball in the last couple of years. The 1 seed and the 2 seed in each division get a bye straight into the quarterfinals. So Georgia Southern is the 3 in the East. They will match up with the 6 in the West against ULM at 1 o'clock Eastern coming up on Thursday. Number 4 in the West, Arkansas State faces number 5 in the East, Georgia State, following that match. In the nightcap, it's number 3 in the West, Louisiana, taking on number 6, Appalachian State in the East. Number 4 in the East, Troy, faces number 5 in the West, Little Rock. The winners of those will play the 1 and 2 from each side. So on Georgia Southern side of the bracket, the winner of the Eagles against the Warhawks will face the number 2 in the West, UT Arlington Mavericks. Ark State, Georgia State winner will face number 1, South Alabama, and then so on and so forth. Coastal Carolina finished 2nd in the East, Texas State finishing 1st in the West. But it'll run Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 4 straight days, packed full of volleyball down at Foley, Alabama, in the Foley Sports Tourism Complex.
And remember, they got their first ever tournament victory just last year. So this is a more seasoned bunch than what you would have probably anticipated.
And, of course, all of that going to be on ESPN+, so you can follow Chad Willis and the crew all the way through Foley. I don't know that they take the cameras to Lambert's, but because that might, the rolls might break a camera or two.
Well, if somebody tries to play catch with the camera, then somebody else is going to be broken.
Yeah, well, and the roll's going to win.
Oh, yeah.
I can promise you that.
That's good.
Georgia Southern Volleyball, good luck to Coach Willis and company as they head down to Foley, Alabama. Georgia Southern women's basketball gets it started off in a big-time way, 2-0 on the season, got the victory 68-66 over the Auburn Tigers on Thursday, and then followed that up with a 99-71 victory over Fort Valley State on Saturday. And you and I have talked about it in the days since, but that game against Auburn was really good for women's basketball on a couple of different fronts. Obviously, you want to start the season with a win. When you do it against an SEC opponent, and I know Auburn had lost coming into that game 17 straight. They lost all 16 games in SEC play the year prior. But first-year head coach Johnny Harris, a long-time and highly revered assistant coach in the SEC, going to Texas her last couple of years. She takes over that program. There's a lot of excitement around Auburn women's basketball, even though it has struggled in years past. But because of Johnny Harris coming in, a lot of excitement around that program. But Georgia Southern really holding tough in that game, and Chad Jackson and I were talking on the broadcast. There were a couple of different parts where Georgia Southern in years past may have turned the tide a little bit different way. They had control of the game for a lot of the game, which sounds crazy against an SEC opponent.
I'll tell you why I'm laughing.
But I'm sure. But there was a play late in the second quarter. Eden Johnson gets called for an offensive foul. I'll just say it's the kind of calls you're going to get when you're going up an SEC opponent in an SEC building.
Been there, yeah.
But at that point, you saw Georgia Southern respond at the beginning of the second half. Late in the game, you had a couple of really big and ones for Auburn, one to go ahead, one to tie the game. That building went electric. The first time really you realized there were fans in the stands all night long because it was relatively quiet for much of the game. But Georgia Southern responded from both of those, retaking the lead. And then there was a huge play for Auburn as one of their posts who does not take threes. She does not do it. Uncorks one from the top of the key, and of course it finds nothing but cotton.
Yeah.
It's just how you draw it up. Mm-hmm. That gave Auburn one of their largest leads of the second half. and I say largest leads of the second half, it was 2. But Georgia Southern answers.
Tell the story.
Retakes the lead. But in years past, you would have seen not necessarily a crumble effect, but you wouldn't have seen a bounce back for Georgia Southern women's basketball like you did. And I think it's something that Coach Howard has talked about ever since she got to Statesboro, a culture under construction. She's talked about that the first 2 years. But now she, in the offseason, has said, it's enough about the construction. You got to see the mansion. And so you've done the construction. Now you've got to show what the construction has done. And, oh, by the way, it's 2-0.
Number 1, turn the tide against Auburn. Extremely well done by you.
Sorry, I didn't realize that. Elise is going to be ticked I said that.
I just had to. I was like, God, that's crazy. But it's not out of the ordinary for a mid-major to lead a major into the second half, into the second half. It happens. It's happened a lot more because there's a lot more
ULM gave Auburn men's basketball a run for their money the next day.
Texas State was at the lead against LSU in the second half. Both teams ended up coming back and winning. But most of the time, whenever the Power 5 or the major school takes the lead back, the mid-major doesn't see the lead again.
Yeah.
That's just that's the way of the world. You have a 10-point lead, 21-0 run. It was nice while it lasted. Let's cash a check. Let's get out of here. Let's get the food. Let's get out of here. But for Georgia Southern to reclaim the lead after giving it back to Auburn, you look at that in March as a moment when this team showed what it could do. And the ironic thing is that was almost 4 years to the day when Georgia Southern men went to Winston-Salem and beat Wake Forest. And I remember the conversation that night. As great as that was to beat Wake Forest, it could not be the biggest moment of the season.
Yeah.
And I know that Anita Howard and that coaching staff are saying, as great as it is to beat an SEC team, got a lot more basketball to play. This cannot be as good as it gets for this team because it is year 3. Trying to make that move, see what the mansion looks like after all the construction. This is the time. That's a great start, but let it continue.
And that's what she talked about. In the grand scheme of things, if you go and don't do anything in Sunbelt Conference play, nobody's going to remember that you beat Auburn. Nobody's going to really care. But the biggest thing, and I know I keep harping on it every time I talk about this game, Auburn took the lead 11 times in the fourth quarter. 11 times. They only had once where they had the lead for more than one possession.
Jeez.
And it was only for 2 possessions.
I know that she likes a fast-paced brand of ball, but that's a lot of lead changes in 10 minutes.
And you had a good fast pace because both coaches wanted to go up and down, which I think the Lord Chad Jackson was there with me that night to give me a little bit of a break. But Georgia Southern really did a good job of slowing Auburn down. And once you got Auburn into a half-court set, that was ball game. That was all she wrote because Auburn was not good in half-court set at all. And Georgia Southern's defense has heavily improved in the half-court, like Coach Howard has talked about for years.
It's that Bill Belichick style of coaching where you need to find the one thing that you can take away from someone. What can you do that will make a seemingly good team look ordinary? Some you throw a zone at them, some you throw a press at them, some you force them at the free throw line, you make them take tough twos. Whatever you've got to do to beat somebody, especially a team that is from a power conference, how are you going to beat them? For Georgia Southern, remarkable consistency from opening tip to final horn, and that's something extremely difficult to do, especially against a team that you're not supposed to beat. But let that be the beginning of something special this year, if it is to be.
You had a couple of really big inputs for that game. Tanaya Marks was fantastic against Auburn. Eden Johnson is the one that really stood out. We talked to her post-game. She ended up, after a couple of stat corrections, with 10 points, 13 rebounds, 6 offensive boards against Auburn.
How many blocks/steals?
Don't get Chad started.
Oh, Chad was all fire.
Please don't get Chad started. But she follows that up against Fort Valley, 11 points, 6 rebounds, and just 16 minutes of action. Against Fort Valley, Taryn Ward really came on, the reigning Sunbelt Conference Freshman of the Year. She had 15 against Fort Valley State, in 24 minutes of action. So a really good, well-rounded, and you've heard it time and time again, Coach Howard's going to play a lot of people. I promise. You're going to have line changes where all 5 come on, all 5 come off. It's going to happen.
You know, in the case of Eden, one thing that you brought up during the broadcast that I wasn't aware of is how good she is at the free throw line.
Yeah.
You don't have the big shoot well at the free throw line. You automatically think, okay.
Yeah, she was 92% last year.
You think, okay, Shaq's going to the free throw line, so it's going to be maybe 1 out of 2 at best. But to know that you're possibly stealing a possession every time you go to the line, you say, oh, they've got to earn the 2 points. But when you're that good, and when you're consistently that good, you're basically stealing possessions like Terry likes to talk about with Georgia Southern football. You got to find a way to get them when the clock is stopped. And in a close game, more free throws you make, more valuable they are.
No doubt. Georgia Southern women's basketball will look ahead as they take on FIU coming up on Wednesday. It is Greek night. Greek day, I should say. It's a 3 o'clock tip-off inside Hanner Fieldhouse on Wednesday.
Baklava for everybody.
I don't think that's the kind of Greek they're talking about.
Oh.
I think it's more fraternities, sororities.
Okay. That would make more sense. Everybody walks in, they get this big... What? I thought it was Greek night. Yeah, it's baklava. There you go.
That'd be awesome. FIU will...
Baklava giveaway.
1-1 so far. They play tonight at Kennesaw State before making their way down to Statesboro on Wednesday. But they have fallen to George Mason by 2, 69-67, and then defeated Florida Memorial. But that one just a 72-69 victory down at Ocean Bank Convocation Center, which we have frequented a couple of times.
The coldest arena I have ever been in.
Right, I forgot about that.
My life.
I completely forgot about that.
The coldest arena ever.
That's awesome.
Look, when you go watch a hockey game, there's ice. You expect it to be cold. It could be in Southern California, Las Vegas.
Right.
When you go inside, you expect it to be cold because guess what? There's ice.
Right.
You don't necessarily expect that when you go into a basketball arena.
Especially a basketball arena where their floor looks like a beach.
Yeah, the surroundings make it feel like you're in South Beach because you're in Miami.
Yeah.
But
you've got cabanas. You got the water on the court on the edge. We were floating.
Cold.
It was freezing.
Very cold. Just last year, because we had the 2 games there for the multi-team, beat FIU in double overtime, so I was an icicle by the time we got finished, and then Carver the next night in front of 2 people. We had the COVID restrictions, and it is what it is. You're 7 hours away from Miami. Carver's not going to get a whole lot of travel.
No.
It's just a very unique situation to play a neutral game against Carver because we just played them earlier that week at Hanner.
That's right.
But such was 2020.
There's going to be a really good 30 for 30, I can promise you, coming out on the COVID year.
Yeah.
Or there should be at least.
30's not long enough.
No. Georgia Southern women's basketball, after taking on FIU on Wednesday afternoon, they will head to San Diego doing a California swing. A couple of Californians on the roster for women's basketball. Deja Holmes, one of those. They will head to San Diego State on Saturday at 2 p.m. tip-off out in San Diego. San Diego so far on the season 2-0. Got the victory against Cal State LA, 72-57, and then got the victory at UC Irvine, 68-60. They will take on Cal State Fullerton in Fullerton tomorrow evening. But cool swing for women's basketball as they will be out there, and they'll also play San Diego Christian coming up on that following Monday. It'll be an 11 p.m. local tip. Local here, I should say. So that'll be a late night for those.
Yes, local there would involve Betty Bye on the East Coast.
Yeah, no doubt. But a 2 o'clock tip-off at San Diego State next Saturday, and then 11 p.m. the tip-off on Monday against San Diego Christian. Get a couple of days out on the West Coast. And you've heard it from women's basketball the last couple of years, trying to have a trip that's more of a destination. You get a couple of games. I think of a couple of years ago under Coach Drown, whenever Georgia Southern went to New York to play.
Sure. Remember that.
And you've had a couple of different go to Las Vegas for the multi-team event out at South Point. So it's been cool. I won't be able to go to that one because we'll be against BYU on football on Saturday, but I'm sure I'll get the lowdown from Chad Jackson.
I wouldn't expect anything less.
Oh, no doubt.
And they will have fixed that block and steel business.
I hope so. For everybody in California's sake, I hope. Georgia Southern men's basketball also off to a 2-0 start. Got the victory 82-71 over the Ball State Cardinals to open up the season inside Hanner Fieldhouse. First and foremost is what that was supposed to say. Ball State, that was a really, really fun game to be at. Really, really good atmosphere inside Hanner Fieldhouse. And it's even better when you come out with a victory.
Well, it's amazing what can happen when you put people back in the building.
Yeah, no doubt.
First time that it had been no restrictions since the comeback against the Ragin' Cajuns the year before in the conference tournament, right before the COVID shutdown. Eagles were down 16 in the second half of that game. before Mark Byington ultimately went to James Madison. But to have over 2,600 people inside Hanner on another Greek night to open up the season, biggest crowd to open a home schedule since 2009, and it was a very entertaining game. It was tied at the half. The scoring was balanced. Eagles really buckled down on the boards, played great defense in the second half, and they had 3 blocked shots inside of the last 3.5 minutes. 2 of those
were they really blocked shots? Just for Chad's reference?
They were block shots.
Okay, fantastic.
Yes, they were block shots. Caden Archie gets one right before the media, and then out of the media, Kamari Brown comes up with one, leads the break where Caden's dunk blew the lid off the place, one of the top 5 loudest I think I've heard it in 7 years. Getty Uzapaitis hitting a 3 from the right wing to make it 70-63. That put the game out of distance. And to see 6 in double figures, and Caden Archie also had 9, who were you going to pick up?
Yeah.
The highest score for Georgia Southern had 15. You had 11 points for Toyambi to go along with 7 rebounds. So well balanced because the team basketball element that Coach Berg has been preaching as part of the process ever since he got here, starting to see the fruits of that.
Yeah, and you talk about 6 different guys in double figures, and we've talked about spreading the wealth as far as scoring is concerned. But something that I didn't realize until after the game, going back and looking at the box score, spreading it around on the glass as well. You had 2 guys with 7 rebounds, and Andre Saversov, Prince Toyambi, both with 7, and then 6 each for Kamari Brown and Cam Bryant. So you've got 4 different guys with more than 5 rebounds on the night.
If there has been a point of emphasis in this offseason leading into the year, boxing out. They have a chart during every day in practice. The director of operations, Jack Keller, is over by the whiteboard. Every time somebody misses a box out, it's a tally mark, and that's an 11. That's a down and back in 11 seconds. Needless to say, those have gone down quite a bit since they started implementing that, but you're seeing that come through in the games. Kamari Brown has 13 rebounds over his first 2 games. Prince Toyambi is always going to be a terror on the offensive glass. He was second in the country in that category last year. I'm just so impressed by Andre Saversov, though. Somebody that is bigger, he is stronger, he really understands his body, how he can have an impact on the inside. He's not as reliant on the 3 as he was a year ago. That can be part of his game while not being the biggest part of his game. And it's really good to see Caden Archie back in rhythm after having to miss the last 7 of last year.
Follow up the victory against Ball State. They would head down to Tampa, Florida, a 53-41 victory for Georgia Southern against South Florida. And it's a game that you and I were kind of watching from afar out in Texas. Mike Grace had the call for that one on gseagles.com. 3 different Eagles in double figures in a really heavily defense-influenced game, but really good for Georgia Southern. It doesn't necessarily look like it from an outside looking in, but that's a really good victory against the South Florida team.
And considering that was a bye game, which means Georgia Southern got a paycheck from South Florida to go down and play that game, and they beat them by 12 points. That's not a great situation. Didn't get a chance to go on that trip, but Nick Sparacio, athletic trainer Mark Jeanette, got a chance to catch up with former assistant coach Larry Dixon, who's now on Brian Gregory's staff. Down with the Bulls. Getting a chance to go back and watch the game, Georgia Southern's physicality in the first half wore down South Florida by the time the second half even got there.
Yeah.
It just got to a point where they didn't want to go in the lane. Eagles defended exceptionally well. They just started shooting 3s from every part of the court. There was a stretch in the second half. They missed 16 shots in a row over nearly 13 minutes. And it's not as Georgia Southern dominated offensively in the second half, but if you don't give up points, you cannot lose.
Yeah.
As simple as that sounds, if you don't let somebody score, they had 3 free throws over that stretch, that nearly 13 minutes of second half. And offensively, Cam Bryant, who's had a really nice start to the year in 2 games off the bench, he made a career-high 3 threes. Trey Cobbs has a really quick first step. He's been the point guard to start the first 2 games. His quick first step, he also took one of the charges during the second half. Carlos Curry coming in off the bench, the only true big at 6'11". He scored 4 points on a couple of made field goals. So as deeper as this rotation goes, you're finding that these guys that play, it's not just somebody that's trying to buy 5 to 7 minutes.
Yeah.
It's somebody that when they come in, they're going to have an impact and simply not be a line on a score sheet.
Somebody else really good to see, Elijah McCadden back for this squad. 13 points, 5 rebounds, had 3 of the 9 assists in the ball game as well for Georgia Southern. He plays 29 minutes after he missed the Ball State game because of an injury. We expected to have him back. I don't know that you necessarily expect him to have him back for 29 minutes and to do what he did, but really good to see Elijah come back.
to lead the team in scoring and to look as smooth as he did, he made a really sweet move at the right elbow, spinning by a South Florida defender. He went with hesitation, then spun to the basket. He's done this a couple of times in his career. He doesn't get a chance to set it up a whole lot because so many teams are zoning Georgia Southern, and those lanes are often clogged. Fortunately for the Eagles, the first 2 games they've seen mostly man, but even when South Florida went to a zone in the second half, they didn't run pressure zone. And they were down by double digits most of the half, but they couldn't generate enough transition opportunities to come back. They were just having to settle for threes. That doesn't mean the Eagles weren't turning the ball over. They had 5 shot clock violations, which is really high as part of 18 turnovers. But as far as not giving up the run-out opportunities or the atomic bombs, as coaches will say, I think South Florida only shot 5 layups the whole game.
Wow.
And for a team that has so much new blood on it, a lot of transfers, but Brian Berg knows one of them pretty well. Russell Chiwa is their 7-footer. He coached him for a couple of years at Texas Tech. But to see how they simply took a team out of its offensive game plan and to do it on the road, because as Coach Berg says, defense travels.
Yep.
And they held them to, I think it was 26% in the game. You would like that to persist. Get off to a good enough start tomorrow night against Bob Jones, get to 3-0, and then we'll see what happens this weekend in Spartanburg.
Tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, the tip-off inside Hanter Fieldhouse. Georgia Southern welcomes in the Bob Jones Bruins coming down from Greenville, South Carolina in the NCCAA, a Division III conference, but Bob Jones coming in. I've seen them a couple of times over the years, but then Georgia Southern heads to Spartanburg, South Carolina to take on a Hampton team on Saturday, and then the host of the multi-team event at Wofford on Sunday, 5 p.m. the tip-off. Both of those games in Spartanburg, Mike Grace will have. Saturday, because of the football conflict, will be internet only. Sunday will be on the full network along the Georgia Southern Sports Network. But again, Mike Grace will have the call for both of those on Saturday and Sunday. But as Coach Berg talks about, can't look at those till you look at Bob Jones. Bob Jones, a team that has struggled on the year, and it's one on paper for Georgia Southern. This is one where you work on things, you focus on yourself, and you make sure that you are good going into what's going to be a next week and a half, really, that's going to give you some troubles.
Yeah, in this case for Bob Jones, this game doesn't even count towards their schedule. When they play these Division I teams, they're exhibitions, so really they're 0-1 so far. They lost to Piedmont. They did play Wofford, ironically, lost by 40 points up in Spartanburg. Wish I was going to see Richardson Indoor Stadium. I know that you've been there, but hopefully get a chance to see that down the line because you've raved about it and you were up there.
As much as I disliked
Benjamin Johnson Arena.
Yeah. As much as I disliked that place, the Richardson Indoor Stadium, and it really kind of pains me to say that I liked something at Wofford, but that'll do.
But with Bob Jones to start the week, you've got to set the tone early.
Yeah.
No need to let them think that they belong in this kind of game because for them, they're going to run a heavy ball screen offense, drive and kick, try to jack up as many threes as they can. If they score baskets, they're going to get into a press to speed up the tempo. Typically in their games, regardless of whether they're playing someone in their division or a D1 team, it's high turnover, it's high shot, it's high tempo. That should feed right into what Georgia Southern wants to do offensively because they want to go at a faster tempo when they've got the ball this year. But make sure you set the tone early. A lot of guys are going to get a chance to play, which means that different combinations will be able to go at it on court. Get yourself in the right situation for those consecutive road games up in Spartanburg this weekend. First against Hampton. That's a like matchup. Remember, Hampton joined the Big South not too long ago, and Wofford has really developed into one of the top mid-majors in the country.
Yeah.
You know, Mike Young, longtime head coach, went to Virginia Tech a couple of years ago. His top assistant, Jay McCauley, took over. I believe that they were picked to win the Southern Conference this year, them and Mercer and Furman and Chattanooga. It's going to be a really good league against SoCon basketball's gotten really good the last few years. They're expected to be at the top of the league, so that'll be a nice test for Georgia Southern on Sunday at 5.
So Tuesday, 7 o'clock, the tip-off against Bob Jones inside Hanter Fieldhouse. Wednesday, 3 o'clock, the tip-off for Georgia Southern women's basketball as they take on FIU. Moving into Georgia Southern football, a really good night in the Lone Star State at Texas State. 38-30 the victory for Georgia Southern over the Bobcats of Texas State. In a weird game.
Bizarre.
Good gracious. Every time you thought there wasn't something else that could happen in that game, it said, watch this.
This is what happens when you put two teams against each other that are struggling.
Yeah.
Because while they showed flashes, for the majority of the game, you could understand why each team has had so many issues in 21. Look, I'm happy Georgia Southern won. They were the team that was just good enough. We saw the emergence of Jalen White again after the unfortunate incident with Gerald Green, but as Coach Whitley said earlier today, he did fly back with the team. He appeared to be in as good a shape as possible. He's not going to play this weekend once they figure out what kind of protocol he has to go into with his concussion. A lot of guys went down. Most came back, but the one that did not, Cam Ransom, injured that left throwing shoulder after he made his second career start. His status for the weekend will be determined later on this week, and we'll talk about BYU during our last segment. It seemed that each team invited adversity with more adversity. We talk about overcoming it, but each team said, no, I want to do this. No, we're going to make this as difficult as possible. Each team blocked a punt for a score, and unfortunately in Georgia Southern's case, that involved another touchdown in the final play of the first half. Never thought we'd see it, and we see it in 2 straight weeks. But then the play that changed the game was when Georgia Southern had a blocked field goal.
And I've never seen this.
Not like this.
I've never seen where you have a field goal blocked and you keep possession.
The important part of the play was that since the ball went beyond the line of scrimmage, Texas State went for the recovery, and the Eagles, cognizant enough to realize that they could strip this out because behind the line of scrimmage, it would have ended the possession, unless Texas State would have had it there and run it back. But in this case, it went into the hands of Kevin Anderson, their safety. Somehow in the pile, it got stripped. Because of all the bodies that were surrounding the football, you couldn't see exactly what went down. But then Anthony Beck picks up this football and starts running into the end zone. They never blew the whistle. We thought, did Beck just score a touchdown to put Georgia Southern back ahead? Because it was a tie game at that point.
Yeah.
But they ruled that it was a block kick, recovery, fumble. Georgia Southern did get it on the second try. They went and looked at it. Not a whole lot you're going to be able to determine. So Georgia Southern recycled the downs. 2 plays later, Bo Johnson, 25-yard touchdown catch. Eagles never trailed after that.
And it was really good to see, a lot like we talked about with women's basketball, Georgia Southern bouncing back after a couple of adverse situations. You talked about the blocked punt for a touchdown for Texas State on one of the last plays of the first half. You saw it the week prior against Coastal Carolina, which you rarely see that once in a season, let alone twice in back-to-back weeks. But it really impressed me how Georgia Southern came out of the locker room in the second half and bounced back from what could have been a folded up and let's head home.
Because the way that they've started second halves typically this year, it's been 3 and out, give up a touchdown, and then you're automatically on your heels. They've at least had some success in the first quarter on opening drives. The opening drive field goal against Texas State was the 5th time that Georgia Southern has scored on the opening drive this year, which 5 out of 10 games isn't great, but it's a lot better than what had been the case over the previous few years to have 3 opening drive touchdowns this season, which is always nice to bring up. But in the end, 2 teams that are struggling to get to the finish line, you could have easily seen both teams blow the other out.
Yeah.
You could have seen both teams win close. But at times, we were looking back and forth thinking, what are exactly we watching here? Just because neither wanted momentum, then both wanted momentum so bad, but they just had so much trouble executing their game plan in whatever phase was on the field. Thankfully, though, the ball went to Jalen White's hands in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
And that last drive, that touchdown drive, he had 50 yards rushing. You also had the play where Derwin Burgess, who we haven't even mentioned yet, Burgess had a 19-yard catch on 3rd and 13, part of his huge day. He goes for 134 on 5 catches. That 48-yard score was the first of his career. And then another freshman on defense this time, Eldrick Robinson, was named Defensive Player of the Week by the conference just a little while ago. 12 tackles, tackle and a half for loss. He also had that interception during the fourth quarter on the tip ball by Justin Ellis. You're hearing a lot of freshmen, redshirt freshmen, sophomore. You're at a point where these guys are going to have to play, but at the same time, you let them play, they're going to figure things out, and they're going to start making plays instead of just being out there.
You bring up Eldrick Robinson, and I've told this story on pregame. You and Terry have told it during the game, but I don't know that we've told it on the podcast, and since the podcast was created to tell stories, we're going to tell it again. But I think back every time I point to Eldrick Robinson and Mike Edwards, I think back to a couple of weeks ago when we were setting up for Hail Southern Live.
Oh, yeah.
Look out. Practice gets done. Everybody huddles up at midfield. Everybody see your position coaches. After that, everybody goes inside, shower, head home. We look out probably 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes after everybody had gone inside, and there are 2 players and what looked like a coach standing at the end zone nearest Bishop Fieldhouse. Look down there and can see that it's Mike Edwards and Eldrick Robinson. This is right around the time that they cracked the starting lineup. May have been a week or so after. And we couldn't tell the person that looked like a coach had their back to us, so couldn't tell who it was. Coach Whitley comes up and he's talking to Terry, and Terry asks, "Who's that down there with him?" Todd Bradley Glenn.
Yeah.
And
might have found his calling.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's worked. But that's special for a couple of different reasons. One, you've got 2 freshmen that are just coming into getting adjusted to what Division I college football is. You've cracked the starting lineup because you put in the extra work. You put it in every single day after practice. And then you're doing it. You're taking the initiative to go to Todd Bradley Glenn and say, "Hey, help me with this. What do I need to do here? This is what I do." You pick the brain of the guy that can't help you on the field, but he's helping you on the field in a different way. Being able to do what he does, pour what he knows into these guys, really, really special all the way around to kind of pass the torch for Todd Bradley Glenn to be able to say, this is what Georgia Southern football is all about. You've got to learn what it takes to be a Division I football player and do it from one of the best that's come through.
If you're a freshman defender, who better to learn from?
Goodness.
Because what hasn't Todd Bradley Glenn seen?
Oh, no doubt.
I'm not talking about just football. I'm talking about life. Who better to learn from? And it just so happens they both play inside linebacker.
And we've talked about it with Coach Whitley and Coach Sloan in the weeks afterwards, and they say it's not just on the football field. They'll go to Todd's house, Todd will make food, and then they'll start watching film together. It's not just...
The puppies are following the big dog around.
Right. It's not just, hey, I need to do this on the field. It's the entirety of what a college football player has to go through. Watching film, learning the playbook, learning why you're doing what you're doing, not just being a robot and say, okay, I got to stand here and look at that guy.
Yeah. It's brotherhood. And having Dylan Springer on last week, and whenever I think brotherhood, I think Dylan Springer right away, and I wish I would have chanced to talk to him a little bit more about that. He was a phenomenal guest on Hail Southern Live last week. That's an application of what the brotherhood really means, because those 2 guys could have looked at cracking the starting lineup as true freshmen to say, well, I've reached my goal here, now what? But those 2 just love to play this game.
Yeah.
Fired up guys that play fast. They're steadily learning what it's going to take to be not just a starting Division I linebacker, but to be a consistent Division I linebacker and to maintain. In Eldrick's case, great that he was Player of the Week to have 12 tackles, and even Mike Edwards, his tackles have increased progressively. He had a stretch where I think he had 4 or 5 straight games of 5 tackles. He finally got to 8 against Troy. But those 2, if they can hold down those spots, that solves a problem that you had when this season began.
Yeah.
Because at that point, you were down to your number 3 options after the injuries that had taken place already.
Yeah, and it's kind of the silver lining. You realize what you have, and I'm sure Eldrick and Mike would have done it if they would have been the 3rd-string guy or if they're the starter like they are now, but you have the opportunity where Todd Bradley Glenn can stay after practice with you and do whatever he does, and I'm sure he would have done a lot with them had he still been playing. But it's almost the silver lining with all the injuries you've seen, especially in the secondary and the back 7 for Georgia Southern, back 8, whatever you want to call it. The silver lining is you're getting guys like Mike Edwards. You're getting guys like Eldrick Robinson to be able to show what they have, and especially now that you've got Coach Helton in evaluating what he has when he takes over after the Appalachian State game fully, that's what Coach Helton's looking for. It's looking for, it's great that you can make plays, but even more so, what do you do when the camera's not on you? What do you do when it's not the big lights of ESPN or whatever it might be?
Just the 1 or 2 lights at Paulson Stadium that were on.
Yes, exactly.
They would have done that whether Hail Southern Live was there or not.
Yeah, no, and it's not just every Thursday they happen to pop out when they see people come into Bishop. It's every day.
We just happened to look out and wondered, what are those two doing on the field with that third guy? And we realized who the two were, who the coach was. Well, in this case, the stand-in coach. But that, I hope, is the start of what could be two really good careers for those two here.
No doubt. It'll be a big game coming up this weekend, expecting around a sellout, if not a sellout, for BYU coming in on Saturday, 4 o'clock to kick off. We'll be on the air with the Cutwater Spirits the Cutwater Spirits tailgate show.
Terry keeps changing it. It's fine.
It'll be all right. 2 o'clock for the tailgate show in the back of the tailgate lot. Hopefully much better weather than we had 2 weeks ago, which it couldn't have gotten much worse. But BYU coming in.
We'll see it next week up in Boone. We'll see what worse looks like the following week.
Oh, don't tell me that.
Just prepare. I'm just.
No, I'm 100%. I was looking at we were doing the Pick'em segment this past weekend in Texas State, and I looked at the weather and it said 35 in Boone. I was like, I kind of take that.
That's a heat wave, isn't it?
No kid.
Not just as long as there are any 50-mile-an-hour winds and 49-yard field goals being blown off by 100. Look, when Bass made the first one, I thought, okay, that's a bad man. But then the second one came, it looked like it was it, and then it just decided to take a right turn and run back to Statesboro.
Yeah, it sure did.
That was a crazy Halloween night.
I think the best part of that night, and I don't know that a whole lot of people realized it, but you had so many guys, for whatever reason, it was kind of strange how it worked out. A lot of guys getting cramps during that game.
Yeah.
And then you had the construction of the indoor or the end zone facility was underway. So Georgia Southern didn't have a locker room. They had to go up 2 different hills across the street to their locker room. So you've got guys that are cramping that are having to walk up 2 different hills when it's about 12 degrees.
And Kendall hurt his ankle that night. So they were trying to get him back and forth.
That's right. I forgot about that. Anyway.
Eagles win.
Yeah. Eagles win. Georgia Southern will take on the BYU Cougars coming into Allen E. Paulson Stadium again. Highest ranked opponent to ever come into Allen E. Paulson Stadium. And it's a team coming in 14th, 15th, right around that 14-15 mold.
Get the CFP rankings tomorrow.
I was about to say the CFP rankings will come out in a little bit, but this is a really good BYU team. They've played the first 10 straight, and then they finally got an off week before this week. So they finally get a much-needed break, but then you come into Allen E. Paulson Stadium.
I'm going to be a fan here real quick. This is a really cool matchup.
Yeah, I really like it.
Never thought I'd get to see a game where Georgia Southern would play a BYU, and with the home and home that was set up, Georgia Southern's going to get to go to Provo in 2024, and that one could be up in the air because BYU is going to be joining the Big 12 in 2023, so there is a chance that the schedule could be reworked, and that one might come off the table. Now, there's nothing that's been said about that yet, but it is something we may have to prepare ourselves for in the case that this is just a one-off. But like BYU did last year with Coastal, a game that was put together in roughly 15 minutes, and they come on a Thursday, ends up being the game of the year, and Coastal gives BYU its only loss. But this Cougar team is all about offense.
Yeah.
Close to 450 yards per game. They love to throw it. Jaron Hall is about as measured, poised, and gifted a quarterback that Georgia Southern is going to see. At one time, a two-sport guy. He was an outfielder for the BYU baseball team. But as good as he is, their running back, Tyler Algier, might be one of the best to ever play in this stadium.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's a stretch because I've watched him a lot. And I kept thinking, who does he look like? Last couple of years, Georgia Southern's played Clemson, Travis Etienne, LSU, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he's only about 5'9", but Etienne, the build is similar, but Etienne, track star, he's a little bit faster, even though Algier runs really well. More and more I looked at it, he reminds me of Adrian Peterson. Because the way he runs and the way people bounce off of him, you watch all those old AP films, nobody can tackle him, and it looks like he's not even trying.
No.
And Algier is so strong and so smooth that his running, it's effortless. Leads the country in rushing touchdowns, 7th in the country in rushing. He's almost 1,200 yards, 10 games into the season. He's going to turn pro next year. He could come back again, but he's going to turn pro. He's He's going to finish his career after this year. He is just that good.
Yeah. It's 17 touchdowns. And I know you talked about how he leads the nation, but 17 touchdowns through 10 games.
Well, 5 of that was against Virginia.
Right.
And
this is for a team that throws the ball more than they run it.
Mm-hmm.
Their offense is predicated a lot on throwing the ball. But because you've got somebody like Algier, 265 passing yards to just 186 rushing yards, that's a decent balance and close to what everybody says they want, 50-50, yada yada. But they've got 22 passing touchdowns to 21 rushing. So as much as there's a gap between the pass and the rush in yardage, it's not that way when you go to scoring.
And there's something that's a little bit off-putting about their numbers. This is how numbers don't tell the entire story, because the numbers say they only run about 66 plays per game, which makes them around Georgia Southern in terms of tempo, where you're not going that fast.
Yeah.
But they only possess the ball for 29 minutes a game. So when you watch them, when they have the football, they're going.
Yeah.
There is no red light for them. They don't have a whole lot of time of possession, because when they have the football, they maximize it. A lot like Coastal in the way that they can score quickly, but Coastal will balance it out because they'll have 7-8 minute drives. This BYU team is not all about long drives.
Yeah.
They're looking to show you how much weaponry they have on offense, especially at receiver, even though they're going to be a couple of guys down this weekend. They just have so many different ways that they can get you. And the fact that you've got to worry about Algier and you got to worry about Hall, we can't worry about both at the same time. You got to pick one.
You talked about having a couple of guys out. Head coach Kalani Sitake talked about it in his media availability earlier on today. There's been articles that come out, but their top receiver in Neil Powell not going to be able to play in this game. He got injured in their game 2 weeks ago against Idaho State. That's a big loss for them, but you still got weapon after weapon for this offense.
Yeah, 46 catches for Powell, led the team, but he scored a touchdown against Idaho State in that dominant victory, their senior day. It was more or less just a glorified scrimmage. Idaho State could not do a thing against that offense, but he scored a touchdown, came down awkwardly on his leg. It sounds like his season is over, unfortunately. And then another guy who's been out the last 2 games, Gunnar Romney, one of their other top targets. He's had a knee issue, missed the last 2 weeks. They don't know if he's going to be able to return yet. He could be healthy enough, but knowing that BYU has a matchup against USC, that's really ironic. But they get a chance to go to the Coliseum against USC.
USC might have a good scout.
Yeah, that's a very good point. But in their minds, this is probably one, despite the fact that they've got to go more than 2,000 miles, I don't think that they would rather use who they want to use, get out of this, trying to get back to full health, because playing 10 straight weeks, we'll get to the defense in a minute, but they're nicked up. They are banged up. If you don't have 2 of your top wide receivers, but you can get by without them, you'd rather do that. Now, the Nakua brothers are more than capable. Puka Nakua, Samson Nakua, extremely athletic. Samson goes about 6'4". He had the big catch to begin the Virginia game. Keanu Hill is somebody that's emerged lately. He had a touchdown against Iowa State, also blocked a punt for a touchdown in the fourth quarter of that victory against the Bengal Tigers. They use their tight ends really well. Isaac Rex and Dallin Holker are very good. Their offensive line is big, old, and physical.
That's a great combination, isn't it?
You think about it, because with BYU, a lot of times they're the oldest team in the country because you have a mandated 2-year mission trip that has to be taken before you graduate. So in most cases, the average age is about 23, 24 years old. And a lot of these guys are already married, they have kids, they've started families, and they are able to recruit really well in terms of linebacker, offensive line, and tight ends just because of the kind of guy that you get at BYU. That's just how they've developed their recruiting strategy. And as a program that is independent, but it's a nationally known program in the ilk of a Notre Dame, it has really worked for them.
You talk about the long travel that BYU has to make, and just to go the other way the following week when they go to USC. Coach Sitake talked about it in his media earlier on today. They're actually going to come out on Thursday, a lot like you saw Georgia Southern do when they went to New Mexico State, went out to Idaho, go on Thursday, an extra day. And I think he said every time they come to the East Coast or around the East Coast, that's what they do when they hit Eastern time zone.
Well, you've also got to think they're going to be losing 2 hours.
Yeah.
For Georgia Southern, we go Central, we know we're going to gain an hour. We went to Idaho, we gained a couple of hours. But for them, they're going to leave Salt Lake City And Provo, Salt Lake City are about an hour apart, but they're going to leave. And by the time they get here, it's going to be 2 hours ahead of what they usually would be. So they've got to be even more particular about how they arrange their travel. Now, they've played in the state of Georgia before. They've been to Atlanta a couple of times, so this isn't necessarily foreign.
Yeah.
But as far as these two teams, outside of sharing the color blue and some national championships, they wouldn't have any reason to be in the same conversation with each other.
We've talked about the quarterbacks a little bit in Jaron Hall, but there's a chance that you could see three different guys. Baylor Romney's been banged up a little bit throughout the season, and so that's kind of put Jacob Conover into the mix, the freshman out of Arizona. But Jaron Hall is really good. You talked about him being an outfielder for the baseball team. He is really, really good. Just 16 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. Really good at what he does. And he's kind of in the... He's more athletic than a Levi Lewis, but in that same ilk of he just doesn't mess things up.
I like that. A right-handed Levi Lewis.
Yeah.
The way that they make him look so good because the offensive line is so physical, they don't give up very many sacks. They've only given up 13 all year for a team that passes as much as they do, so that's a really low number. But so many times the pocket is so clean, and I've talked about this before. When Georgia Southern saw Trevor Lawrence 3 years ago, he's 6'6", so he can see over everything. You're going to be calm if you can see everything within a 5-mile radius. You can see over top. You're the first one to know when it rains. In the case of Jaron Hall, somebody is 6'1". He is back there. He is so steady.
Yeah.
To be that relaxed because he knows that the blocking scheme and his protection are going to be that good. One of the best deep ball throwers I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And when you've got wide receivers that can make plays like they do, he can chuck it up to anybody, and the odds are they're going to come down with it. It's going to be a test for the secondary, which has improved the last couple of weeks despite being down so many guys. Now, a little bit that's been because of rain, but Georgia Southern has also been more aggressive with its front seven, and they're going to need to find a way to get pressure on Hall. They can't just sit in zone coverage, or he's going to pick them apart.
You flip it over to the BYU defense, again, really, really good, averaging just giving up about just shy of 400 yards a game, but rushing really good, just 146 yards a game. And it's kind of what Georgia Southern's gone up against the last couple of weeks, having to do a little bit more passing than you're used to if you're Georgia Southern. But this is a BYU defense that's really good, especially with that linebacking core. And it's an interesting one, and you and I were talking about it the last couple of days when we were putting our stuff together. On their depth chart, they list, I think, 16 different positions.
As starters.
Yeah, that's a flag or two. And it's not that depending on the game, it's depending on what the offense is giving you is what their defense is going to look like, and not just is it a 3-4 or 4-3. You could change a whole lot of stuff up with this defense.
In the 2 full games that I watched, they did not give the same look on consecutive plays in any game. Sometimes 3, sometimes 4, sometimes 5, sometimes 6. Sometimes they go 5-0 with no linebackers and 6 defensive backs. Elisa Tuiaki was a defensive coordinator for a spell at Oregon State. He has worked in the state of Utah for a number of years. They are about deception. And they've got so much depth this year that the fact that they can be the way that they have despite losing, I think, 10 guys at some point because of injury, and there's going to be 4 or 5 that don't play this weekend because of lingering things as well. The fact that they've been able to put up those kind of numbers, it's an overachieving unit.
Yeah.
Last year, I think that they looked at themselves as, okay, 11-1 record, it was a soft schedule. But as an independent, they had to put that together on the fly because COVID knocked away much of their schedule. They didn't get a whole lot of respect for as good as the record was, but you had quarterback Zach Wilson, who ended up as the number 2 pick last year. Defensively is always going to be the undercard because the offense is the name of the game out in Provo. This defense, and really the offense as well, they took last year as a slight, and ever since those consecutive losses to Boise, and they also lost to Baylor, who's now number 11 in the polls, they have taken it upon themselves to play like they're being disrespected.
Yeah.
Because I think last year they were, but the schedule was the reason. And this year, they're 14th as we speak in the CFP. If they won a New Year's 6 game, they're going to have to find a way to eke into the top 10, probably around 8 or 9 to feel like you're safe, because no team that high has ever been denied a spot in the New Year's 6. They keep coming at you.
Yeah.
They don't tackle that great in the open field, though. So if Doug Roos can find a way to get the ball into the hands of Caleb Hood, Gerald Green won't play this week, but get Jalen White involved in the pass game, maybe a little bit more. He only has 1 catch this season. Derwin Burgess emerged. Figure a way to find matchups, get them in space, make these guys tackle. Because as much as they rotate and as many guys as they play, they do struggle consistently tackling in space.
One, this is going to be the all-name team because their pronunciation guide has an asterisk at the bottom that says, just come talk to us, essentially.
That's what happens when you have a bunch of players of Polynesian descent and you got to figure out exactly where the emphasis goes.
And it's fantastic. But you look at guys like Malik Moore with 3 interceptions on the year, and it's not necessarily a team that forces a whole heck of a lot of turnovers, but doing a really good job of just being solid. And they're not great open field tacklers like you talked about, but they also don't do a whole lot of things wrong.
They're plus 10 in turnover margin this year because they're opportunistic when they're there. They don't hawk you and force a ton of turnovers, but offensively, because they are so disciplined and sound in what they do, and they just score so many points, when you're scoring points, you're not turning the ball over.
Yeah.
So when they're doing that, it makes those turnovers forced on defense look that much better. Now, they're going to recover some fumbles. They blocked a punt last week, which Georgia Southern's had 2 in a row to end the second quarter. This is one where it could get interesting because there's no frame of reference for one team against the other. Now, BYU's played against the option. They've seen Air Force, they've seen Army, and they played against Navy to open last year, and they crushed them. It was a nationally televised game, but Navy was a mess at that point and really haven't been good the last couple of years. So they've seen a variation of option. This is different because of how much more Georgia Southern has worked in zone, RPO, and just straight drop back. But a lot of that is going to depend on how healthy Cam Ransom is.
Yeah.
I do think that Justin Tomlin is going to end up starting, and I can't say that, look, that's not lock, stock, and barrel. That's not a firm. But throwing shoulder injured, I don't know if Cam's going to play, but I would think it would be at a reduced role.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what the next couple of days look like at practice and how much Cam is able to do. Coach Whitley talked about it at the press conference earlier today. With the AC joint, it's a matter of how much he can take.
Correct.
And so, could he play? Yes. But it's a matter of how much he can take. And you can make arguments for a lot of different things going into that, but it'll be interesting to see what the next couple of days look like as Georgia Southern gets ready for the BYU Cougars. The 2 polls that are out right now, AP has them at number 14. USA Today Coaches Poll has them at 15. Again, the CFP, which is really at this point in the season the only one that matters, is going to be coming out tomorrow evening, and we will see where BYU sits at that point in time. But it will be the highest-ranked opponent in Paulson Stadium. Announced late last week that less than 500 tickets, so right now there would be less than 500 tickets available for this game. Expecting a really big contingency of BYU fans coming down from the Atlanta area, the Charlotte area.
They got in on this pretty early, and this is one that we've known about for a while that was going to creep towards a possible sellout.
So that's going to be a rockin' atmosphere at Paulson Stadium. It's also senior night for Georgia Southern as well, so a lot to get behind. And last I checked, the weather was supposed to be really, really good for Saturday. And that
would be nice.
We'll confirm that here in just a moment.
Hang on. Hold on.
Time. Saturday, it will be high of 62, low of 41, just a 2% chance of rain.
So sellout crowd, 25 seniors getting honored.
Yes.
Earlier kick,
yes.
4 p.m. We're on it too with the Cutwater Spirits tailgate show. And
one of those that kind of designed for the people in the Atlanta area that you can come down, make it a day trip, and get on back.
I anticipate that regardless of how this one goes, plenty of people are going to make the trip to Boone anyway because it's Georgia Southern Appalachian State, and that's a whole other thing that we'll talk about on Monday. But if you have other plans, because it is Thanksgiving weekend next week, it's your last chance to see Eagle football this year.
Yeah.
Unless you're going to watch it on E+, which is more than okay. But we'd love to see you here. Just love to see you here.
Going to be a lot of fun. Again, 4 o'clock to kick off for Georgia Southern BYU. We're on with the Cutwater Tailgate Show at 2 o'clock with Frank, Russ, Terry, and myself, and who knows what kind of cast of characters will show up.
This week, mentioned about the Bob Jones game tomorrow. That's the TP game. If you don't know what that is.
Oh, that's right.
Find it on social media. We're going to have fun after Georgia Southern scores its first points against the Bruins tomorrow night. 7 o'clock will be the tip. We'll be on at 6:30. Hail Southern Live coming up on Thursday, 7 to 8 p.m. over at the Gene Bishop Fieldhouse with interim head coach Kevin Whitley. We'll review last week's matchup against Texas State, breaking the 4-game skid, and we will also take a full look at these Cougars.
All right. The TP game. I'm glad you brought that up because I whiffed. Also, SWAT saying there's only about 350 tickets available now for Georgia Southern BYU.
No, and Steven, I think he counted them all.
Probably. Went by Ticket Smarter. 1, 2, 3.
That section's almost done. Here we go.
But first points of the game against Bob Jones, the TP goes flying.
Georgia Southern will take the technical foul. Bob Jones will get free throws, and then we'll go on.
It goes back to the early days.
About 40 years, yeah.
Of Georgia Southern basketball. And if I'm not mistaken, you've seen a TP game.
Yeah, 2 years ago. Yeah, that was the first one that they'd done in a long time.
Yeah.
We tried to ask Miss Helen. She couldn't pinpoint exactly when the tradition stopped, but the opening game against Reinhardt 2 years ago, Quan Jackson, first bucket of the game, the TP flew. I've still got the video on my phone. It's in slow motion. I think you might have sent it to me.
I don't remember being there.
I think that you were there.
Because I was trying to think about it earlier today, and I don't remember being there.
No, we'll have to match up our dates.
Yeah, we'll figure that out.
We were definitely on the side that we are currently on, not the platform side, because a year ago we couldn't do anything because of COVID.
Right.
But back at our table across the way, because I was ducking, making sure that I didn't get hit by any rolls of toilet paper. It turned out it was fine. Georgia Southern dominated, beat Reinhardt. This is one that is very specific to Georgia Southern. It's very unique to Eagle basketball. It's only the second one get a chance to see, but a thank you to the former coaching staff, head coach Mark Byington, for trying to bring this back, and even more so for the new staff and head coach Brian Berg for wanting to keep this tradition because he's trying to build something special as well.
Going to be really cool to see. I know I've seen the video, and we'll go back to review to see if I was there.
I thought you took the video.
I don't know. If it wasn't me, I can tell you who it was. But we'll confirm that before tomorrow night.
Okay.
But 7 o'clock the tip-off for Georgia Southern against Bob Jones. Georgia Southern women on Wednesday. 3 o'clock the tip-off inside Hanner Fieldhouse against FIU. Thursday, you've got Hail Southern Live at 7 to 8 p.m. inside the Bishop Fieldhouse. A busy week in Georgia Southern athletics, but wouldn't have it any other way as it culminates against BYU. 4 o'clock the kickoff on Saturday evening. For the voice of the Eagles, Danny Reed, this is Colin Lacy saying so long, everybody.
You've been listening to Inside Eagle Nation, powered by Learfield, the official podcast of Georgia Southern Athletics.